Hello, everyone. Welcome to Court Chatter Live. This is our weekly broadcast that we are doing just to catch everybody up on what we're covering on Court Chatter, what you guys are watching, what you're following. It's sort of a weekly roundup of all the cases that we are interested in and that I know you're interested in.
Just to catch everybody up.
And I did it again this week where I have the volume up. Sorry about that. Okay. Also, this show, a lot of people watch it after it's been archived, so it might get a little confusing, but while it's live, like it is right now, there are people in the chat room that's over on the right-hand side of the screen, and I'll be able to interact with them. So I can read comments on air or answer questions. They can talk with each other while I'm discussing these cases. If you're watching this later when it's archived, then down below the stream there are comments, place for you to comment, and I'll come in periodically during the week and check that out and respond back to you. All right, I see people starting to come into the chat room. I'll say hello to Addie and Linda and Lynn. So I think we should start this week with the hearing that was most talked about, at least it was most talked about in our chat room, and that is Dalia Dippolito. So let me give you a background on this case. You guys may know it. It was back in 2011 was her trial. And so there were a lot of us that watched it. Court Chatter didn't exist back then, but a lot of us did watch that trial. In 2009, in August of 2009, Dalia, I'm going to show a picture of her, and that might remind you guys who she is. All right, there's Dalia. Okay, Dalia Dippolito. Oh, and this is in Florida. She's married to her husband named Mike Dippolito, and she goes to her former lover, is what they're calling him. I don't know if they had a thing going at that time, but they'd been off and on for a long time, and says she wants to hire someone to kill her husband. And he testifies at a hearing last month that this gets him worried, and so he contacts the police. Now, what happens from there is what is up for debate, and really, let's be honest, it's not up for debate for most of us. So the police get involved, and they start setting up, and they wire the guy, and they start taping meetings that she's having. They start monitoring the phone calls. In the meantime, this Boynton Beach Police Department contacts the TV show Cops, and they want to be featured on the TV show Cops, and they think that this Dalia story is a perfect story to set up and be on Cops. So as many of you may remember, we saw this episode of Cops. I'll show you that picture, and that might remind you if you didn't see it or if you knew it from the trial. There she is. So there's Dalia with the police sergeant when he is informing her that her husband has been killed. Okay, so I skipped ahead a little bit, but that's a picture that some of you might remember seeing. Okay, so she goes on trial. This was in August of 2009. Now, at her trial in 2011 is when it finally goes to trial. She doesn't testify, but through her attorney and opening and closing statements and through some questioning of witnesses, her story is this was all part of, it was all scripted. It was all part of her husband, Mike, wanting to get a reality show started, a reality TV show started. So this was all part of that act, is what she claims. Now, if you watch the videos they have when they taped her, and we have those on courtchatter.com. You can go to the archives tab, find Dippolito's page, and you can watch the different videos they have on her. And she's meeting with this guy who was her former lover and telling him exactly what she wants to happen. And she wants her husband killed, and and she wants it to look like it was a break-in. And then he sets up the meeting with the hitman, who's really an undercover officer, and then she meets with him, and that's also all recorded, and we can watch all that. And yet she's still claiming this was a scripted act and that her husband was in on it the whole time. So So in August of 2011, the jury did not buy that, and they convicted her of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. And then she was sentenced to 20 years. So that was her sentence. But she was only in jail, so she was out on bail the entire time until her trial. And then she was convicted in May of 2011, and in September of 2011, her attorney successfully argued to get her a bail and let her be out while she had an appeal pending. So she's been out on house arrest with a monitor, and so she's only ever spent a few months in jail while she's appealing this. So everybody that watched this or followed this was like, yeah, done deal. Hello, she hired this guy to kill her husband. It was obvious. And you need to go in and watch that. When I showed you that picture of her in the blue tank top and they're telling her husband's dead, that was all set up. And the TV show Cops was there filming. And you can find that video on our site too. And then she does this great acting job. Oh my gosh, she's dead. And it's crazy, right? And then they arrest her right then on the spot and say, he's not dead, he's fine, and we know you did this. So a turn of events happens in 2014. A higher court overturns her conviction based on an error during jury selection. So we see this happen. We see this happen from time to time, and it's why everything that happens in jury selection is very important, because it can come back later in appeals. The higher court ruled that the judge should have allowed her defense team to individually question jurors about the media instead of just questioning them in groups. Individually question them about the media exposure. And so because of that, she gets a new trial. So she's still been out all this time. She's house arrested at her parents' house. And now we just had a couple of hearings. So last month started a hearing. She has 3 new lawyers, and a lot of you will know one of her lawyers, which is Mark Eglarsh, and we know him. We've seen him on HLN and various programs. He's representing her and 2 others. She's got a 3-lawyer team now that her parents are paying for, because somebody asked me that. So the hearing started last month, and then they didn't get it finished in that day, and they came back this week to finish it. And the hearing is because the defense wants all the charges dismissed now. And they say that this new defense team says that the police, there's police misconduct in this case, and that her civil rights were violated, and that she was entrapped with this setup with her boyfriend. I know I can see you guys going crazy right now in the chat room, because it is unreal, right? So they want all the charges. They just want it outright dismissed. And they say that that they had the former lover was pressured into framing her and setting her up. That the big meeting that happened at a Chili's restaurant where the 2 of them discussed this, that was never taped, even though sometimes he was wired. And that one, there's no tape of it. And he says when he testified he had a wire. The police testify and say that that something must have malfunctioned, and they have no tape of it. So of course the defense is saying that there's something messed up with that. They also have several recorded telephone conversations with her, but they don't have all of them, even though the defense knows they were monitoring all her phone calls, and they want to know where all the recordings are. So that's sort of their argument. I'm looking in the chat room. Merritt says you just can't make this stuff up. And isn't that the truth? This really was an episode of Cops, and it is a trial that we are following. So the thing that happened this week, and the reason we're talking about it, is that it was a continuation of that hearing to dismiss the charges, and she got on the stand. So Dalia got on the stand. I can show you a picture of what she looks like now. Okay, so that was Dalia on the stand this week, and boy, did she have a tale to tell. And look, I'm not even going to pretend that I think that she's innocent, because I don't. I watched the entire first trial. I saw all the evidence, and I think she was trying to hire someone to kill her husband. Her husband is just lucky that she didn't succeed, and then it was an undercover cop she met with. So she got on the stand and she said this was all scripted and that everybody was in on it. Her former lover, Muhammad, was in on it. Her husband, Mike, was in on it. And the three of them were trying to get a reality show going. And everything was scripted. So all the recordings, like in the car when she meets with him and tells him how she wants her husband killed and to make it look like a burglary, and she paid him money, then all of that, she says, was scripted. They were reading from scripts. And then when she meets with the undercover cop, who she thinks is a hitman, she says, no, that it was all scripted. But then what she says happens is in that meeting in Chili's that conveniently we have no recording for, so I guess she can say that now, that Mohammed pulled a gun on her, showed her a gun, and threatened her life if she didn't go through with this. So first it's a scripted reality show pitch they're trying to do. And then she says when Mohammed said that that there were going to be police officers there when this was going down, and she claims as part of the script, she didn't want that. She didn't want the police involved as part of that. So she was trying to back out. And Muhammad threatened to kill her and her family and to do them harm if she didn't go through with it. And that's why she ended up having to meet with the hitman, who turns out to be an undercover police officer. This is her story. And I'm telling you, it was ridiculous. I couldn't even pretend to just report on that this week normally. I had to keep putting comments in my tweets because it was ridiculous. You know, one of my comments were, how are her pants not on fire right now? Because it was the most ridiculous story, because they have her on tape planning the whole thing. And it's obvious it's not some scripted thing for reality TV. So that's what this hearing was about. That was probably the most excitement we had all week, was Dalia on the stand, spinning her tale. The judge will rule. The judge did not make any rulings and said they will rule within a week or two. So we'll find out about that. But her new trial is scheduled for May. The judge is not going to dismiss these charges. Let's get real. So I'm sure we're having a trial in May. Okay, so Red is in the chat room. I'm just going to read some comments. Isn't Muhammad dead? No. So there is somebody. I'll tell you about somebody they mentioned that was dead. But I'll show you the picture of Muhammad. This is the former lover that ends up being the informant for the police. Okay, so there's Muhammad. That was him on the stand last month. Now, he didn't testify in the original trial because he said he was going to be out of the country. And so his video, so he had to be presented via a video that was already taped before. And then that gets all convoluted too, because it turns out that they can show that he probably was in the country because he was like pulled over for a traffic stop or something a couple of days before court. So he didn't want to be there. The other thing is he's upset about is he was always told that he would be a secret informant. And now, of course, he's not so secret. And so he's upset about that. When he testified last month, he said that the cops pressured him, that when he contacted the police about her, she had told him that she wanted Mike killed because he was physically abusive to her. Okay, so this guy, who I think has really always been in love with her, he says he called the police so they could investigate the physical abuse and scare her out of this idea of trying to get him killed. Okay, like the cops are just going to scare her out of the idea and say, oh, okay. So he claims he didn't want all of this to happen to Dalia. Hey, by the way, he calls Delilah. And everybody keeps saying, how does he not even know her name if they have this long history? Well, apparently that was the name she'd always given him, was Delilah. It's the only name he ever knew her by. That was whole nother story. So anyway, that's Muhammad, and he's their number one witness now. He's the secret informant, except the defense is the one that called him to the stand last month, because he, like I was just saying, he claims the police pressured him. He did not want to go through with all this. He didn't want to do the undercover work. He didn't want to set her up. And he says that he was pressured. I don't know if he used the word harassed. He may have, to do this. And so I think Dalia's defense team has taken that, or Dalia herself, a step further to say, and then he threatened her with a gun in Chili's. Now, he was asked that on the stand last month. He said, of course I didn't have a gun, and of course I didn't threaten her. Okay. Merritt, has anyone bought the book movie rights to this case? So that's interesting, Merritt, because there was a book written. And the interesting part of this is it was written by the DA that prosecuted her last time, who is now a defense attorney. She wrote the book, and I think it's called Poison Candy, something like that. So yes, there was a book written, and definitely I think there should be a movie for sure. Linda says, are her ex-husband and Muhammad backing her crazy story? So of course they're not, right? So Muhammad testified this wasn't ever a reality show pitch. And Mike, I'll show you her husband. Mike testified at her trial, and at the trial in 2011. And oh my gosh, he was a character on the stand. He was entertaining, if nothing else. He butted heads with the defense over and over again. All right, here's Mike. He would fight back with the defense, and then they would have sarcastic comments back and forth with each other. He just wasn't having it. Now, he doesn't have a clean past, and he has done some jail time, and I think he did things for like security fraud. You know, I don't remember all the details of that. Not violent crimes, but something like that. And so he, of course, says, of course, this wasn't some reality TV pitch. Hello? She was trying to get me killed. Now, she calls him right after she gets arrested for this. She calls him. Well, we have that jailhouse call too. So if you want to go look at her archive page, we have the jailhouse call between them. And that's also a great thing that you need to go in and listen to. Everything about this case, luckily nobody died, so I guess I can kind of laugh about it a little bit, is everything about this case is, you think it's a movie. You think it's definitely made for TV. All right, let me read some more of your comments. Hoagie, she is guilty as sin. Oh, Marcia says, does she still have that crazy speech pattern? And yes, she has a pretty bad lisp. So there was a lot of comments on that this week from people that were watching, which is interesting because I think she's always had that lisp, but when you see the undercover videos, you don't really notice that so much. No, the sound isn't that great, and it's never on her face or anything like that, but I feel like it's not always that pronounced, but it could be that people that have a speech impediment like that gets worse. Like, so when she was on the stand this week, it could have gotten worse. All right, what else you guys have to say? Hoagie, oh no, I love Mark Egarsh. I know. Well, look, he's a defense attorney. This is his job, is to defend people. That's what they do. So we can still love him. We can still like him, and he can still be defending someone we don't like. Okay. Marcia, how does a random undercover cop become part of a scripted show? So the prosecutor under cross-examination this week, by the way, if you didn't see the hearing, go and watch it. It's in our archives on YouTube on our Court Chatter View channel. Because he kept being like, oh, was that in the script too? Oh, was that in the script too? And she would go, yes, yes, even though that would be the most ridiculous thing that would be in a script. She wasn't varying from her story. So when she said she thought that the hitman was going to be an actor too, but then when she asked straight out about that, she would just answer by saying, well, you know, I didn't want that meeting. At that point, I had told Muhammad I didn't want to do this anymore, and he threatened our life. And they'd say, okay, but at some point you knew you'd be meeting with a hitman as part of your reality TV show. So that hitman was supposed to be an actor too, right? And then she really wouldn't answer that. She would just say, well, I didn't want it. I had called it off by then. So ninjas made her do it. I know, Hoagie. Those of us who followed the Jodi Arias trial think ninjas are always involved in every case. Okay. Oh yeah, Linda Brick points out that there was real money exchanged, and she gave her a real home address, all this stuff that's supposed to be for a reality show. And that was a great point too, because if she's filming for a reality show, why is she giving out her real home address? She's telling that to Muhammad to give to the hitman. But if you're going to pitch this to people or put it out on the internet or do whatever they were going to do with it, why would you say your real address? I mean, come on, the whole thing is just ridiculous. Linda says, I love the prosecutor. Linda, and she had no second takes regarding the script. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Merritt wants to know her educational background. Well, one thing that's funny is the very first question the prosecutor asked her at cross, he gets right up and he said, "So when did you take acting classes?" And she said, "Oh, I had a class back in high school." And then I do know that she was doing real estate when she was married to Mike. Now, her and Mike didn't know each other very long at all, and got married quickly. And then this happened quickly after that. Like, she was just ready to get rid of him. Motive. So let's talk about motive for a minute. He had all this restitution he had to pay off for when I told you that Mike, this is her husband, Mike, when he spent time in jail. He had to pay back like $200,000 in restitution. And when Mike testified at her trial, he said that she'd offered to pay half of that off for him. Like, I don't know where she's getting $100,000, but she had offered to pay half of that off for him. So he had given her $100,000 cash. And he said it was like $191,000 he owed. And he said, and then she was going to put up the other $91,000 and that was going to get paid off. Well, Dalia didn't do that. Dalia took the $100,000. And then he kept asking her, like, well, is that paid off, or where's the proof that it's paid off? And she kept putting him off and putting him off. So they think part of her motive was she now owed $100,000 back to him. And the second thing was that she was just annoyed with him. She never really loved him. Okay. All right, I think that's it for our questions that I can see on the screen from Dalia, and we can move on. We probably won't see her back in court. I mean, we might, but hers until trial, there might be something, and her trial is scheduled for in May. All right, let's move on. We had another hearing this week that we all love to follow, Justin Ross Harris. Okay, I'll put up his picture, remind you guys who we're talking about. Okay. By the way, we've always called him Justin Ross Harris, and that's how all the documents have come out because that is his legal name. But he goes by Ross, and he doesn't go by Justin at all. So I talked to a reporter that's going to be covering the trial, and a couple of other of us decided we are not going to use the hashtag Justin Ross Harris anymore. I'm just throwing that out there for those of you that follow this on Twitter. It'll be Ross Harris from now on because it's a lot shorter and takes up a lot less room when you're tweeting stuff. So Ross Harris. Now, it's something else you might know the trial buys. It's been dubbed the hot car death. So his little boy Cooper, and I'm going to put that up right now because he's so cute. Okay, he's accused of leaving this cute little toddler in a car in Georgia. This is in Georgia. It was in June of 2014. And Cooper died in a hot car that he'd been left in for over 8 hours. And that's how he died. Then his father is charged with his death. And that's what this is about. So you'll see you'll see it referred to a lot as hot car death. And I will show you what Justin Ross Harris looked like this week in court. I love how they do this, and they make him look so nice and wholesome. There he, oh gosh, that picture's small, sorry. There he is in his sweater vest coming into court this week. There's sweater vest, Ross Harris. There you go. Yeah, it's small. All right, so that was him this week in court. So they've been having a lot of battles and a lot of pretrial hearings, and a lot has been going on. And this was the final scheduled pretrial hearing happened this week. Doesn't mean they could always have another one coming up, but this is the final one that was actually scheduled. And this was to go over several motions that both sides wanted. The prosecution wants to put a bunch of different evidence on a trial, and they wanted the judge to rule on what can be allowed and what not, so they know what to say in their opening statements, know what to prepare for. The defense didn't want a lot of that in. I'll pull up my notes right here, and I'll talk about what this was this week. The defense argued that they wanted any evidence of Ross Harris's extramarital activity to not be allowed in court. They say it's not relevant. Well, part of what he's charged with 8 counts, and you can read exactly what those counts are on his archive page on our site. But a few of them are related to him sexting with minors. Okay, so there was a lot going on with him and other women and girls, including the passing of images back and forth, which is that's why he's charged with that. And the prosecutors say that does go toward his motive, that he didn't want to be tied down with his son anymore. And he was also allegedly doing that and doing sexting and some of that in his office while Cooper was down in the car in the parking lot dying. So they want that excluded. They want, they say a request for nude photos is not evidence of intent to kill. The judge did rule for the defense about Cooper's insurance policies. So there was 2 insurance policies that Ross had taken out on Cooper. I'm assuming him and his wife, but they say that he took them out. They totaled $27,000. The judge ruled that that doesn't have anything to do with this case, and that's not really motive. And actually, the state agreed that that doesn't necessarily go to the heart of their case. So they won't be able to. So there will be no mention of life insurance policies. One thing that came out too, I thought I knew a lot about this case and that we'd heard pretty much all we were going to hear about it. There were things about him searching on the computer about how things react in the hot weather or inside a hot car. Objects, I guess it was objects he searched for, and how they react in different forms of hot weather. Early on, it was reported that he visited a website called Child Free Life, and that he wanted to be part of a Child Free Life, and I guess that's a community out there, and that's why. And so he wanted to get rid of Cooper. The defense is arguing, saying he didn't do that. That inside an article that he had come across, there were links to something like that, and he may or may not have clicked on those. But then the prosecutor got up and said, absolutely not, that he did search for that and he was in there. So that'll be interesting to see exactly what that evidence is when it comes out at trial. But the one thing that I had never heard about until this week was that the morning right before he leaves, he forgets Cooper in the car and goes to work. He commented on a post online to a woman, and I'll read it exactly, a woman that I could think was on this child-free site. And he says, I love my son and all, but we both need escapes. So, of course, the defense doesn't want that in. In the end, the judge is not going to rule on all these. She did rule on the life insurance, but the rest of the stuff she's not going to rule on. She gave both sides until Monday to get briefs into her. And then she said she'd be making a ruling on what's in and what's out in the next couple of weeks. And then his trial is scheduled for April 11th. So that's coming up pretty quick. I don't know if we'll see him back in court or not before then. Our friend, CNN analyst Phil Holloway, is in the courtroom for Justin Ross Harris, and he will be there throughout the trial as well. So he's kind of our eyes and ears in that courtroom, and he'll be coming on here on Court Chatter Live. We'll be talking about it, and make sure you follow him on Twitter at Phil Holloway ESQ. Okay, let me see if you guys have any comments or questions about Harris before I move on. Yeah, well, Linda says it wouldn't be related except he chose to sext instead of taking care of his baby. Lynn brings this good point up. Forgot his baby, but remembered to buy light bulbs and put them in the car at lunch. So there is surveillance cameras in the parking lot of where he worked at Home Depot. And he also has told the police that he went at lunchtime and bought light bulbs, but he was with another person, different car. Okay, so he's with a coworker and bought light bulbs, but when they came back, he had to put the light bulbs in his car. And at the probable cause hearing we saw in 2014, the detective said that on the surveillance video, you can see him reaching into his car and putting the light bulbs down. And then they kind of said how Cooper was and where he was facing in the car in the back seat and where he was. And they said it would have been impossible for him not to see him when he did that. Of course, he says he didn't. Jan John says, what a cutie Cooper. That pic has been stuck in my head since the story broke. And I think that's true for all of us. We've all seen that picture so many times. And to think that if what the state is saying is true, that his father had him die, and in that way, it's really awful to think about. Okay, let's see if you guys have anything else to say before we move on. Oh, Max is surprised that the life insurance policies are not a factor. I guess for the state to agree with that is not the main motive in the death. Although what they did say about it is it paints an entire picture. But the judge ruled that I guess because there's no evidence, at least that the state has put up so far, that says this really has anything to do with money. Madison says so many people would take that beautiful child. Oh, Lynn, Kathy, why do you think that the mother of Cooper wasn't also charged? So we talked about this a little bit last week. A lot of you think that she was in on this, that because of some comments that she made at the daycare and comments that she made when she saw him in the jail. Things like, I can't quote it exactly because I don't have it in front of me, but did you say too much? I think that was one of her comments to him. So many think that she's in on this. Well, they don't have any proof that she's in on it, and they haven't charged her with anything, and they don't have any plans to charge her with anything. So there's just no evidence out there that she was in on this. And she was kind of sticking by her man, I think. Remember, this happened in June of 2014, and a week and a half ago she filed for divorce. So she's not sticking by him anymore, I guess. Cheryl says death has an awful smell, and how could he not have smelled it when he opened the car with the light bulbs? That was, and I hate to even think about this because it's just so sad, but that would have been about maybe 3 or 4 hours after he'd left Cooper in there. So presumably Cooper was dead, but maybe not smelling yet. Oh, that's right. Susan is in our chat room, and she says that the wife, Leanne, also said he must have left him in the car when she found out he wasn't at daycare. That's right. That's the comment that's got people most up in arms about her. He must have left him in the car. Okay. Merritt says, I think I remember there was a smell of death in the car. Well, I don't know if the medical examiner is going to be able to say that the smell was that prominent when he was putting the light bulbs in after just a few hours. But maybe you better believe that that'll come up in the trial. Okay, I think we are done with Justin Ross Harris. We shouldn't see him anymore in court until his trial, which is April 11th. Okay, I am just going to quickly go over a few other things. We started a new trial this week, David Morgan, and he's in Washington State. He is accused of beating his ex-wife over the head and then lighting her on fire, lighting the house on fire, which was his home. They shared custody of their daughter. They were divorced, and she went to his house every Sunday night to pick up their daughter. Her name is Brenda Welch. And prosecutors say she got there that night and he attacked her and he hit her over the head, and I think several times, and then poured an accelerant on her and around the house and lit the house on fire. So what we know for sure is his daughter wasn't there. He had taken his daughter to his parents' house. Now, why is he going to do that when the standard is she's coming to pick up their daughter at 7? That's what had always happened. And she had sent a text earlier that day, just verifying. And yet he had taken his daughter to his parents. And when firefighters got the call, and the first ones that respond, he is in the doorway and he's kind of they said he was down on his knees, like almost trying to stand up. So he's kind of on the ground. Prosecutors say that he was overcome with smoke, and that's why he ended up right there. They went to start treating him a little bit. He didn't have any injuries, so they put an oxygen sensor on him, and that was fine. And they said he had a few kind of scratches, but he did have blood on his pants and shirt. And the paramedic, that's why they were looking for an injury, and he didn't have any injury. So I think we'll hear testimony that probably was Brenda's blood. Amazingly, Brenda is beat over the head several times and lit on fire. At least fire was on around her, and she survived, but she was in a coma for almost 4 weeks following this. And we're waiting for her to get on the stand. She was supposed to get on the stand yesterday, and they never got to her. And then she's supposed to get on the stand today, and they never got to her. So there is no court in Washington on Fridays, and so maybe Monday for her. But the thing with her is she doesn't remember. She doesn't remember what happened to her that night. So I'm sure she'll talk about their nasty relationship they have. Motive. The state says that David had been out of work and he had just gone back to work, and so he owed $18,000 in back child support, plus he owed her half of a retirement account. I'm sure that was in the divorce, which was like 30-something thousand. So prosecutors say there was over $50,000 reason to get rid of her. That's what they think the motive was. Yeah, Linda says the blood on him was from beating his wife. I mean, many are not assuming he's innocent in this case because, so his story is that he was hit over the back of the head and then woke up in a fire, that he doesn't know what happened. So everyone loves to talk about the ninjas. Ninjas came and did this, and that he doesn't know who did that to them. Red says the latest from the fire chief, because the fire chief has been on the stand and was actually on the stand when we went on air tonight. Couldn't find anything accidental about the cause of the fire. Okay, well, the thing is, I don't think he's not even saying it's accidental because he's claiming somebody hit him over the head. So I guess that's saying that he thinks somebody purposely set the fire. Lynn says the picture of her in the hospital is horrible. It is horrible. They briefly showed up on the screen, but she's not even recognizable. She was beat to a pulp and burned and wasn't even recognizable. Today, a doctor was on the stand testifying about the scan that was done of her skull, and they showed some pictures of her, of the scan, of the x-ray, and you can see all the cracks in her skull. I mean, it's amazing that she survived that, and she's attended the pretrial hearings and stuff. So she's all over this. Linda says intentional fire, major injuries on her, minor scratch on him, guilty. Well, it's sort of looking that way. Hoagie says he just had a small bump on his forehead. That's right. And yes, so you guys are surprised to hear she survived, but yes, she absolutely did survive. I don't know how she survived. My guess is the quick response from the firefighters getting there. They've had firefighter after firefighter after firefighter on the stand. I don't know how many we've had by now, 7 or 8. Everybody that basically was at that scene that night, and that's who they've been having testify. But we're waiting to hear from Brenda herself. Like I said, she's not going to get up there and testify that David hit her on the head and did all this because she has no memory of it. But the jury's going to want to see her and hear from her, and she'll get to testify about their relationship. And that's the motive in this case. Merritt says, he said he left the house and thought she was following him while she was on fire. Right. That's Merritt's comment. Who knows? The one paramedic testified today that treated him in the ambulance while still on the scene and said that that David Morgan said while he was in the ambulance, when they said, "How do you know how this fire started?" And he said he didn't know that he had been in bed watching TV when the fire broke out. But interesting, that's not his story later to the police, because the story later is he was hit over the head. But that's what the paramedic testified today, was the first story David had told. Of course, I'm sure the defense will deny that. Madison's excited. We've had lots of firefighters and police, yes, on the stand. Okay, I'm just reading through your chats, see if I make sure I get all your comments. These people, Linda says these people that claim a stranger did it and they have hardly any injuries, do they really think we believe them? Well, what we've seen, history has shown us that juries don't believe that. Adele says, I thought the defense was horrid to the paramedics that were on the stand. Have some respect. You know, I know the majority of people don't like defense attorneys. They have a job to do. Some do it nastier than others. One comes to mind, and I'll just say that remains nameless because I'm not talking about that trial anymore. But for the most part, look, they've got to defend their client, so they got to do what they got to do. Especially in this case, when I don't know how, they're not going to get this guy off. But you're right. The one paramedic, I think his last name was Bruff, that was on the stand, was pretty combative with the defense, as far as, he just wasn't happy being questioned like he was by them. Hoagie says he said that he pulled her burning sweater off her, but no burns on his hands. Yeah. See, it's all of this. This is why he's on trial, because nothing about his story panned out. Linda, amazing that they're seemingly normal people and they turn out to be murderers. And that we know, right? That we know. As avid trial followers, we see that these aren't just the scary looking people that are the killers. Madison says, yay for their service and bravery for the paramedics and the firefighters. They have a job. Michelle says they have a job to do, and that's probably for the defense attorneys, and that's right. That's, if anybody had known me long enough or followed me long enough, I'm always a defender of a defense attorney. I shouldn't say always. I'm 80% of the time a defender of a defense attorney, because they have a job to do. Now, if I'm the victim in the case, or if I'm the victim's family members, I'm not going to have that same stance. But just as a unbiased reporter of these trials, look, they have a job to do. I also have my friends that are defense attorneys, and they're very nice people. Somebody's got to do it. It's how our justice system works. Merritt wants to know if Brenda was there today during the trial. She had to, I'm assuming she was in the courthouse, because she was supposed to get on the stand today, but I don't think she was in the gallery. Okay, Michelle says, that's my friend Michelle. She says that's what attorney's for, that he deserves his due process. And that's right. That's why we have trials. That's why we don't just hang people in the square. And defense attorneys have to do what they have to do. And a lot of times that means smearing the victim. We see that happen in a lot of trials, and that's very upsetting to a lot of people. Some take it a lot further than others. There's a question from, oh yeah, I got that, Addie. Oh, Michelle says, my husband is a defense attorney and he is a good person. Like I said, I have friends that are defense attorneys, and I'll defend them, because we have to have it. What if there's no defense attorneys? Then how does our justice system work? And guess what? There are innocent people that are convicted. There are innocent people that go on trial. So we obviously have to have defense attorneys. I think the majority of you understand that and don't hate all defense attorneys. I think you just get upset if they appear to have sleazy practices in the courtroom. And I get it. We've seen it. Okay, yeah, both Linda and Hoagie have a comment about that, but it's just the shady ones. You do have to remember that there are shady prosecutors too. We just don't get to see a lot of that. And it's unfortunate. It's like, look, let's just go in and present the case and defend the case. And we don't need to get dirty about it and let the chips fall where they may. Okay, done talking about David. Oh, so David Morgan's still going on. Like I said, no court tomorrow. So I'm going to wrap up with just some updates on a couple of things and what we can expect to see in the near future, unless you guys have anything else. Okay. Florida death penalty. So you guys know that the Florida right now, juries that decide in a death penalty case don't have to be unanimous. They have to be unanimous for the guilty verdict, and then in the penalty phase, it's just a majority has to rule to give death. And other states are not like that. There are a couple, but that's not the norm. So that's been up at the appeals court. People want that overturned. And so we have two death penalty cases that we had been following that are on hold because of this issue with the Florida death penalty. Aries Tisdale, we watched his trial. He was sentenced to death, but nothing's happening with him because of that. And Louis Toledo, who I was all set to cover this case, and we got his whole page going. I got a bunch of court documents up, put a bunch of articles on. We were ready for the Louis Toledo case, and now that's indefinitely on hold because they don't even want to start the trial yet because of how the Florida death penalty is kind of up in the air right now because he was facing death for his wife and her 2 children, who, by the way, their bodies have never been found. So look up the Louis Toledo case if you want to know more about that. All right. Oh, do you remember the case out of New Mexico, Omari Varela, the poor boy that was beaten? We watched Stephen Casas. Is that how you pronounce it? We watched his trial. He was the stepfather. The mother, whose name is Cynthia Varela Casas, hasn't gone to trial yet because her competency has been in question this whole time. She admitted right off the bat to police to kicking poor Amari. He died of internal injuries. It's really, really, really a sad case. And she was just this week ruled competent to stand trial. So we should see her trial coming up. I imagine that'll be live streamed. We saw the stepfathers. Okay. What else? Carnation murders out of Washington State. We've been following that case. Michelle Anderson's on trial for killing 6 of her family members. The case is expected to wrap up next week sometime. That's what Paul Sanders told me, who's in the courtroom and he does his daily write-ups. He thinks that the trial is going to wrap up sometime next week. They've not been streaming that trial. We've seen a few days and that's all. And Master Bob Bashara. I get lots of questions about Bob. Look up his case. I don't need to go over the whole background of it. I call him Master Bob because he was into S&M. I don't know how else to say it. He had slaves as girlfriends. He was the master. And he was convicted for killing his wife, or having his wife killed, but he hired somebody to kill his wife. And now he's had a post-conviction hearing going on, appealing that, saying he had ineffective counsel. That's in Judge Vonda Evans' court, who you either love or love to hate because she's very polarizing. And that keeps getting put off. Every time they can't finish it in one day, they don't come back the next day, they come back the next month. So it's been going on and on and on. And they were supposed to be back February 11th, and it's delayed again to March 11th. So not next week, but the week after, maybe we'll see Bashara. I think that's all I have. Oh, on the Amari Varela case, his mother, Cynthia, there is a conference set next week on the 2nd for her, so maybe we'll have a trial date on that. I think that's all. I'll just see really quick if you guys have any other questions or comments before we wrap this show up. We've also had Aaron Andrews' civil trial, which is interesting because, we don't ever really see civil cases live streamed. And we've been watching her. She's the ESPN reporter that had a stalker install a peephole in a hotel room next to her and then put the video out. And that happened a few years back. And now she's suing the hotel. That's been going. So that's still on. We still should have that on our site. We'll still have David Morgan starting Monday again. And we'll see. Every day we have something that comes up. And I'm looking in the chat room. I just want to thank you guys for joining me again. And we just do this every week, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, just to wrap up the week. I will have guests on from time to time and just talk about all the cases that we're all following. And we will see you guys next time.